Hey guys, how we doing? Jackie here, and Witchwood has finally arrived. We have 135 new cards and a handful of new mechanics. Basically, in this video, I'm going to be talking about how we can use some of these new cards, how we can use some of these new mechanics and what they actually do. And later in the video, I'll be showing off some deck lists which can show how we can use a lot of the new stuff in each class. So, without further ado, let's get this show on the road. The first new mechanic we've been given is Rush. Now, Rush basically allows a minion to attack on the turn it's played. However, it can't attack the enemy hero. So it is only allowed to trade into opposing minions on the turn it's played. So this means that Rush minions can basically be used as removal. You can either use them as a body to put onto the board, or you can use them to trade into opponent minions to gain board advantage. Now, obviously, because the minion has Rush, its stats aren't going to be as good as a minion that would have no text on it. And so, if the opponent doesn't have any minions on the board, playing a Rush minion is pretty weak. However, if you are able to trade into an opponent minion, then it's really, really strong and very effective. So basically, Rush is good against decks that play a lot of minions, but not very good against decks that don't play many minions. The next mechanic we have to talk about is Echo. Basically, if a card has Echo, it allows you to play the card over and over again in one turn. So you can play it as many times as you like. As long as your mana will allow, that is. So we're going to use two of the rogue cards, for example, Pickpocket and Cheap Shot. We can just use the card on turn 2 as 2 mana on its own. Or we could use the card later in the game when we have more mana available. And we can play it once, another copy is added back to our hand, and then we can play that copy and use it again, and then another copy is added back to our hand. And we can do this over and over again as much as we like, or as much as our mana will allow. So Echo cards kind of look weak on their own. Like Cheap Shot, for example, 2 mana, deal 2 damage to a minion is not that great, especially when Rogue already has Backstab, which does that for 0 mana. But what makes Echo cards interesting and potentially really strong is their flexibility. You can just use them for their lowest possible value, or you can use them for their maximum possible value and spend 10 mana using this one card. The flexibility of Echo makes it a really interesting mechanic, and it's definitely going to be a lot of fun to mess around with. The next effect we have is the start of the game effect, and it's exactly what it says on the tin, really. If you can match the requirements of the card, then at the start of the game, a particular effect happens. We've been given 2 legendary minions with the start of the game effect. We have Baku the Moon Eater and Gen Greymane. Now, both of these are legendary minions, and they both affect your hero power. So, we'll start with Baku. What Baku does is, if you only have odd cost cards in your deck, then it upgrades your hero power at the start of the game. And what it means by that is similar to, well, exactly the same as what Just a True Heart used to do, where it literally just makes your hero power a better one. So, Mage will go from hero power deal 1 damage to hero power deal 2 damage. Warrior goes from armor up to tank up, which is getting 2 armor to 4 armor. And there's a variety, all the different upgraded hero powers, which there are some of them which are very strong. And Gen Greymane is kind of the opposite. It's if you only have even cost cards in your deck, then at the start of your game, your hero power becomes 1 mana. So these are obviously pretty harsh restrictions, like only being able to play odd cards and only being able to play even cards. That's quite a restriction. That's a lot of strong even and odd cards for each class. So you have to really work out, is it worth it? Like, is it worth sacrificing odd cards to have a 1 mana hero power? In a lot of cases, the answer is going to be no. There may be a few slim cases where these cards could be good, though. We have also been given some cards that can fit into these odd and even cost decks. So that if you match the effect, they are very powerful cards. So one example we have is Gloomstag, which is a 5 mana 2/6 beast taunt for Druid. And if you only have odd cost cards in your deck, gain +2/+2. So it then becomes a 5 mana 4/8 taunt, which is a very powerful card. We also have Murkspark Eel, which is a Shaman card. It's a 2 mana 2/3 beast again. And if you only have even cost cards in your deck, Battlecry, deal 2 damage. So a 2/3 deal 2 damage is very similar to Medivh's Valet, which is a very powerful card. And yeah, this card is great as well. But is it worth sacrificing odd or sacrificing even to fit these in your deck? It's a tough call. So, how can we use some of the new cards we've been given in some decks? I've been theory crafting a little bit, and I've come up with a deck for each class, which uses quite a lot of the new cards, so we can see how they can get some action. First, we'll start with Druid. Now, Druid's been given quite a few tools, which is supporting kind of having a large hand size. So some kind of hand Druid, essentially. We have Witchwood Apple, which adds 3 treants to your hand, which is very slow to play initially, but by having lots of cards in your hand, you can get really good value out of like Twilight Drake. You can get Mountain Giant really cheap. Bewitched Guardian can get really big, and also Whispering Woods can flood your board. So I've tried to add a few things in here that can help with buffing your hand, with increasing your hand size, like Tortland Forager, for example. It's a body while also adding something to your hand. And Druid has lots of good cards anyway. I mean, you've got Branching Paths, you've got Nourish, you've got Ultimate Infestation. So it's not that hard to have a big hand in Druid. And then when you're playing a lot of cards that really benefit from having a big hand, you can really have some good tempo plays. Got the Sunfury Protector in there to kind of taunt up Twilight Drake and Mountain Giant, so you can play some kind of like taunty. You're essentially like a big taunty Druid, really. So it's basically, well, we can call it hand Druid, really. But it's more basically like a mid-range Druid with some big tempo plays if you have a big hand. Pretty good. Now, the Hunter deck I've theory crafted is very wacky and a hell of a lot of fun. It's basically a quest hunter, which is using some of the new cards to have some cool combos. So one of the new cards we have is Toxmonger, and this card is absolutely ridiculous for quest hunter. So it basically gives your 1 mana minions poisonous as long as it's on the board. So it's amazing with Elven Archer, because you play Elven Archer and the 1 damage it does is poisonous, so it just kills a minion. You can have charge minions like Stone Tusk Boar. And you can do some really crazy combos. We also have Handmaster Shaw, which is a 4 mana 3/6 legendary, which is, in my opinion, one of the best cards in the set. This card is amazing for Hunter, and it gives all your minions rush. So you can have this on the board and literally just keep playing all these minions that would normally have rush and just rushing them into things. So it's kind of like a Tundra Rhino, but instead of giving all your beasts charge, it's giving all your minions rush. And you can do some wacky things. And we also have a new we have the new 3-drop Ravencrawler, which can add 2 more 1-drops to your hand, which can make it easier for you to complete the quest. And obviously the quest is amazing when you complete it. You can play Carnasseran, put all your Raptors in your deck, and then charge them all with Rhino. And it's just a really, really fun deck. We have the Death Knight as well, which now you're going to be able to use the new beasts with the Build a Beast effect, which is going to be really crazy. We've got lots of cool new beasts to use with that. We've got some Rush Beasts, we've got some Lifesteal Beasts, so Build a Beast is going to be better than ever. And yeah, I would definitely recommend giving this deck a go, man. This deck is a hell of a lot of fun. Okay, so the deck I've built for Mage is actually an Elemental Mage. So we have a powerful new Elemental, Bonfire Elemental, the 5 and a 5/5 Battlecry. If you played an Elemental last turn, draw a card. That card's very, very strong. And we have the 2 early game mage cards that are all based around minions. So we have the legendary Archmage Arugel, which whenever you draw a minion, add another copy of it to your hand. And we have Book of Spectres, which is 2 mana, draw 3 cards, discard any spells. So we have very few spells in this deck, so a lot of the time we're going to be, like, we don't really mind if we discard 1 spell, but a lot of the time we're going to be getting 3 minions, and 2 mana, draw 3 cards is insanely good. Also, we have Leyline Manipulator, and we have a few cards in this deck that are creating cards that didn't start in our deck. So, Archmage Arugel, we have the Spellstone, which is very easy to buff, by the way, with all of the elementals we have in the deck. We also have Shimmering Tempest, we have Steam Surger, etc. So Leyline Manipulator can actually get really, really, really good value in this deck and give you some fantastic tempo plays. I played this deck a little bit, and to great success. It's actually surprising how often you can pull off combos with it. Also, a lot of the elementals are fairly strong on their own anyway, so when you're combining that with the tempo of Leyline Manipulator, it's really quite insane sometimes. Obviously, we have the Death Knight as well. With so many elementals, you may as well play Jaina. You can get such insane value in the late game out of Jaina. Like, Jaina can win you the long game in pretty much any matchup, really. One thing about this deck is that to play all of these minions and to get benefit of the new Witchwood cards for Mage, or some of them anyway, we've had to cut a lot of spells, and so we're not playing powerful spells like Fireball, like Polymorph, like Flame Strike. So depending on the meta, you might wanna change some of these cards or add some of these cards in. But yeah, this is a solid building block to go off. Next up, if you were a fan of Secret Paladin, then this is probably the deck for you. This is a Witchwood Secret Paladin. So we have the new Secret, Hidden Wisdom, which triggers when your opponent plays 3 cards in 1 turn, which is, well, it's kind of hard to say how often that happens, to be honest. But I think, obviously, the later in the game it is, the more mana people have, and so the more likely they are to play multiple cards a turn. And they can sometimes play around it by always just playing 2 or less cards. But then, in a sense, you're limiting them as to what they can do. But overall, after playing it so far, I've had decent success with it. And we also have Bellringer Sentry, the 4-mana 3/4 that Battlecry pulls a secret and then Death Rattle pulls a secret as well. That card is really, really good. And also kind of one of the main reasons to play this deck. Obviously, a couple of Murlocs have rotated out into Wild, and so we need some other way of making an aggro Paladin deck, because we still have really powerful cards like Call to Arms and Tarim that we need to make the most of. And I think Secret Paladin might be a way of doing that. It's really easy to buff Secret Keeper. Secret Keeper is obviously very strong. And we also have our new Prince Liam, which Battlecry transforms all of our 1-cost cards in our deck into legendary minions. So generally you want kind of secrets in the early game to buff your Secret Keeper, and then you want to pull up from Sentry. But then in the late game, you don't really want 1-mana cards anymore. And Prince Liam was the answer to that. You can, obviously, you don't know what legendaries you're going to get. You could get a load of trash, but it's a lot of fun and can sometimes kind of win you the late game on its own. Obviously, Paladin has a lot of other powerful cards like Spike Ridge Steed and Tyrion, so I think this deck is just solid. Right then, what do we have up our sleeves for Priest? Well, Priest has one of the most exciting legendary minions from the new expansion, Lady in White, which when you play her, she gives all minions in your deck, she basically uses Inner Fire on all your minions. And generally, Priest has a lot of minions that have higher health than attack anyway, so Lady in White should be good in a fair amount of Priest decks. This specific Priest deck is going to be a Divine Spirit Inner Fire Priest deck, so we're using we're trying to combo them down in 1 turn. However, because of Lady in White and other powerful cards like Duskbreaker and Lyra, we're not fully reliant on the combo. Lady in White can just give you insane tempo. Like, you can turn your 7 mana 4/9 Night Scale Matriarch, which is another new card, and a really, really good new card, by the way. With a lot of Dragon Synergy cards rotating out of Standard, Duskbreaker has a few less activators now, so this is a really good replacement for like the Netherspire Historian and Draconid Operative that the Priests are losing. And it's very good. Like, the fact it has 9 health makes it really, really strong, because every time one of your minions is healed, it can summon a 3/3. And with the 9 health, it's very difficult to remove, so it could potentially just keep producing 3/3 after 3/3. And sometimes it can go really crazy and just win you games on its own. And so because of this card, you don't even need to think about the combo a lot of the time. But we do still have the combo in there. I've also included Swamp Dragon Egg in the deck. I mean, I love eggs. Like, eggs are like one of my favorites. Egg Druid was like my baby deck. But Swamp Dragon Egg, when I first saw it, I didn't think it was that good. But this is a kind of deck where it can kind of fit in, because you are creating another dragon, which can give you an activator for Duskbreaker. Also, it's a 0/3 minion, which means that Lady in White turns it into a 3/3. If it dies to like your Organized Circle combo, that's okay as well. Or if it dies to your Duskbreaker, you're kind of fine with that. So it can kind of fit in here. Feel free to take it out if you don't like eggs, but I love eggs. All right. Yeah, this takes a blast, man. This takes a blast. Now, I've been able to fit in a lot of the new rogue cards all into one deck. It's kind of a mix mash of like Echo and Burgle rogue, so to speak. Obviously, we don't have Burgle in Standard anymore. It's into Wild. But it's the same kind of theme of trying to stealing your opponent's cards. And we have Blink Fox, which is a new great minion for stealing cards. We also have the Echo card stealing card, Pickpocket. And the amazing legendary Tess Greymane, which basically replays all cards from other classes that you've played this game when you play her. So Tess Greymane has loads of potential. And it's kind of like Yogg. Like, I'm going to miss Yogg a lot from Standard, and Tess can kind of fill that hole a little bit because she can do some crazy things. Obviously, you know, she's a bit more predictable because you've already played the cards this game. But Tess is really great. Also, we have Spectral Cutlass. I actually think this card is very, very strong. It doesn't look that strong when you're first looking at it, but whenever you play a card from another class, it increases its durability. And so you can essentially just have this weapon equipped forever if you are just playing cards from other classes. Plus, when you buff its attack, it just becomes stronger, and with the lifesteal, you get even more healing. So I really, really rate this card highly. We've also got some Echo Synergy cards. We have the Mist Wraith, which gets buffed whenever you use an Echo card. It's a formula 3/5, and whenever you play an Echo card, it gets +1/+1. And obviously, you can play Echo cards multiple times in one turn, so you could potentially get the Mist Wraith really big, really quickly. We've also got the Cutthroat Buccaneer in here, which can also buff our Spectral Cutlass. I mean, even just buffing your dagger, I think Cutthroat Buccaneer is just a really, really good new card. But the whole excitement of this deck is around Tess Greymane and doing all of your steely things and echoey things, and then hopefully using Tess to finish the job. You could add more card draw to this deck if you wanted, because we don't have that much card draw. Like, you could potentially play Auctioneer, because we've got a lot of cheap spells. You could play Sprint, Fan of Knives, Blood Mage Thalnos, Mimic Pod. These are all cards you could potentially put in the deck, but personally, I don't think we need them because we have a lot of cards that create other cards. We already have Minstrel for card draw, but then we've got Hallucination, which adds more cards to your hand, Pickpocket, and the legendary Face Collector, which is really cool, by the way. Yeah, Blink Fox. Just lots of ways of adding more cards to your hand, and so we kind of have slightly less of a need for card draw. But yeah, you can put some card draw in if you like. This deck is a ton of fun. For Shaman, I've gone with an elemental theme. Now, we have some good new elemental cards for Shaman. One of the problems with elemental Shaman has been that it hasn't quite had a strong enough early game. Also, it's been lacking card draw. These are probably the main two issues for it. And a couple of the new cards definitely help with that. We've got Zap, the 0 mana spell, deal 2 damage to a minion, overload 1, which is... It's nice. It's nice early game removal. It can help you not fall too far behind in the early game. We also have Earthen Might, the 2 mana buff. This is actually really powerful. Give a minion +2/+2, and if it's an elemental, add another elemental to your hand. Really, really strong effect. One of the issues though is that there aren't that many early game elementals. So we've got like Firefly. There are quite a few not very good elementals that we probably don't want to play. But the card in general is just so good, you definitely want to play it. One of the big ones is Hagatha. The death... Well, it's not actually a Death Knight, it's a hero card. And the battle cry is decent, dealing 3 damage to everything. But what's really, really good about it is the hero power. So after you've played Hagatha, you get a passive hero power. Whenever you play a minion, add a random Shaman spell to your hand. And there's all kinds of Shaman spells. Obviously, there's removal, there's heal, there's burn, there's minion creation, hex. So Hagatha is really, really exciting. Especially when you combine it with Bog Shaper, another one of the new cards, which is a minion that whenever you cast a spell, it draws you a card. So you can basically use your Hagatha to create spells from your minions, and then use these spells to draw cards with Bog Shaper, which is really, really cool. And Grumble is nuts in this deck for sending Battlecry minions back to your hand, and even sending Bog Shaper back to your hand and doing crazy things like this. So, yes, deck's pretty cool. How good it's going to be, not really sure, but Hagatha is very, very exciting. Really like Hagatha. There's also the other new Shaman legendary, Shudderwock, Jabberwocky. I can't remember what it's called. but the other Shaman legendary is really, really, really exciting as well. I haven't built a deck for that just yet. I'm going to have to spend a bit more time on that. But yeah, definitely go check that out as well, because that is absolutely bonkers. So, what can we do with Warlock? Now, Warlock is very popular as a control deck at the moment. There's lots of control Warlocks and cube blocks going around. But with all these new cards, I think Zoo could make a comeback. We have Witchwood Imp to slot in the deck, which is a nice new 1-drop. Generally, Warlock already has really good 1-drops, but it's pretty cool because you could use it to buff a powerful 2-drop. Like Knife Juggler, for example, is a perfect one to buff, because it's something you want to protect and keep on the board. And then we've got a few kind of new mid-rangey minions that are fairly good. The Duskbat is really nice, but you need to be able to damage yourself on your own turn to be able to use it. So we've also got the Blood Witch in here to synergize with that as well. But the most exciting thing about this deck is Glinda Crowskin, which, as long as she's on the board, gives all minions in your hand Echo. So obviously we have lots of tiny little minions in our deck, and with Glinda on the board, we can create multiple, we could say play a bunch of Knife Jugglers, a bunch of Voidwalkers, a bunch of whatever minions we like. Obviously you don't want to be playing like a load of Flame Imps, otherwise you're just going to kill yourself. Don't do that. But there's a lot of good minions that would be really nice to give Echo. And so Glinda's, and because we have lots of low end, we do often run out of steam very quickly with this deck. So Glinda can really, she can turn one draw into being a whole turn, like of using almost all your mana. So she's really, really good in that sense. And the last card we've got in here is Mad Hatter. I actually really like Mad Hatter because it's giving +1/+1 to 3 minions, and which seems, but it's any 3 minions on the board. So obviously it can buff your opponent's minions, which seems bad, but if you're the only one with the board, then it's only going to buff your minions. And in a zoo-style deck, you're generally going to be controlling the board. So Mad Hatter seems like it's going to be really nice in this type of deck. Yeah, obviously Control Warlock's probably going to be good as well. But I think this is a pretty nice way of slotting some of the Witchwood cards in. And a Zooish aggro Warlock might just be good. Now, Warrior is the class that's been given the most kind of like rush cards. Warrior's been given a lot of rush cards, actually. There's Red Band Wasp. They have the legendary Darius Crowley, Rabid Worgen, Militia Commander. Like, there's also they have Town Crier, the 1-drop that draws a rush minion from your deck. Also, they have the 2-mana weapon that buffs rush minions. So, it made perfect sense to try and make a rush Warrior deck. For Warrior, and I think the way to go about it is to try and make it kind of like a tempo-y deck. So kind of like a tempo Warrior where we're trying to trade a lot in the early game to just gain board advantage with all our rush minions, and then finish them off with our big threats like our Spellstone, which we can buff pretty nicely with the amount of weapons we have, and we have Grom as a finisher. And so it's a very kind of mid-rangey deck, and it should do pretty well against aggressive decks, really, because you have lots of, like, weapon removal is nice, and the rush minions in general are just going to be really good against aggro. Control decks might be a little bit more of a problem with this deck, but then we do have charges like Corcoran, so... And Frothing can get out of hand sometimes, so... This deck's definitely going to be interesting. Like, whether Rush as a mechanic is going to be successful or not, we're yet to see, but this deck has Rush all over the shop, so this deck is probably a pretty good way of finding out whether Rush is any good or not. Anyway, this video is just to give you guys some initial ideas and thoughts on how you can possibly use the new cards in the new expansion, give you something to work on. But at the end of the day, for me, when a new expansion comes out, it's the most fun time to play Hearthstone. We've got all these new cards, so many things to try out, so many things to experiment with. And I'm going to be experimenting with everything. And I hope you guys too. Obviously, everyone has their own favorite class, which is partly why I've kind of broke down the separate classes in this video. And yeah, I hope to bump into you guys on ladder, trying all kind of wacky things out. Maybe sat there on the ranked floor, you know, not getting too many wins, but having a bunch of fun and trying loads of things out. And who knows, maybe you can work something out that's really powerful and can break the meta. That's what I'm going to be trying to do. But anyway, I hope you guys have enjoyed the video. I've been Jackie, and I hope you enjoy Witchwood.